Loading up, I would like to show you this board. It's got a soft board on this side, and it's stiff on this side, and I put a plastic sheet around it. Actually, any plastic sheet will do. You can buy the board for, I don't know, varies. I think $10 some places, $40 other places. Lasts a lifetime. Plastic sheets. Well, any plastic sheet will do. These ones probably cost maybe a quarter or something. You take an ordinary ballpoint pen, and then you drag this across the surface. Ballpoint pen across the surface. And curiously enough, the line comes up. Isn't that strange? Put the pressure down and the line comes up. Well, I'm a psychologist, so as far as I'm concerned, this is a miracle. I don't have to explain. If a physicist or a chemist, you probably can. Well, I'm going to pass this around, and everybody can have a try. Drag it, and the line comes up. If you push in, then you'll probably cut the sheet. But the great thing about this is that a blind person can make a drawing or even write a letter and feel exactly what they have done as they do it. Right? So 50,000 years ago, cave artists discovered that if you took some mucky thing from the ground and went like that on the wall, you left a graphic act. And you can see it right away. Fascinating. And 50,000 years ago, the idea of pictures was invented. Basically for sighted people probably at the time. And for 50,000 years, we thought pictures are for vision. Well, now we can ask blind people to draw, and we discover, curiously enough, pictures are also for touch and for blind people. So, can I invite you to try this and then pass it around? So, thanks very much all for inviting me, especially Johanna. I'll be working cheerfully with Johanna for a couple of months and having a great time. My goal today is just to provide ideas for educators and exhibit designers on how to reach a visually handicapped audience with this particular system. That, by the way, is from Sweden. There is another one from the States. The one from the States is actually clumsy and more expensive. The one from Sweden is elegant and simple and easy to use. I'm going to show you that these things can be used by the blind. I'll show you that blind people have to draw the shapes of objects. I will show you that when they make drawings, there are different levels of sophistication. So if you were to make a picture for a blind person, you might want to bear that in mind. Is this a blind person with a lot of experience, a picture? Or a child who's just beginning to draw? So I'll show you those. Here are some drawings by a woman from Toronto. I call her TT just to maintain a certain amount of anonymity. I asked her to draw an insect, a dog, and a person. And I think it's transparently clear to everybody here that the insect is the one that is top left, the dog is middle right, and the person is on the bottom. And those look very much like simple drawings by sighted children. And you'll notice that the insect is drawn from above, and the dog is drawn from the side, and the person is drawn from in front. And what that means is that the blind person has a very good sense of the vantage point, what we would call the point of view if we were sighted. They have a sense of the vantage point, the point from which you reach out, much like a sighted person looks up from the point. And that means you have the beginnings of perspective right there. So I'm not the only person who's discovered that blind people can make drawings. Here is Heike Hammond working recently in the Bode and Gemälde galleries in Berlin, and she now runs a program for blind people about art, the history of art, periods in art, and blind adults come to it And as part of the program, she asks the blind people to use these kinds of plastic sheets and make drawings. And here's two drawings of a head by a blind man. And the one on the left looks very much like, sort of cubist drawing of the head. Quite a good little cubist drawing too. And the one on the right looks like some sort of Greek profile. The one's pretty much in front, and one's pretty much from a side view. And so again, you get vantage points, and you get really quite clear use of the line. And this is really charming. This is not from a blind woman, also from handicapped, from Berlin, looked at the Gemäldegaleries galleries. And interestingly, she has life classes for the blind, where there is somebody posed, and you get to feel them, and they're you. And then you go back and draw them. And these drawings look a little Matisse-like, don't they, of two-seated figures, really charming drawings. So, outline stands for surface edges. In cave art, in the Renaissance, we have perspective formally added. There are clever tactics added in the 1800s. Vision and touch. The evidence I will show you comes from Esref, who is from Ankara, Eriko, who is from Japan, and Gaia, who is from Rome. Gaia is a child. And so one person once questioned me after a talk in Berlin and said, "John, you are so despicably European, Eurocentric," she said. And I said, "That's puzzling because these guys are from Turkey and Japan. I think you're going to miss the book." Oh well, she thought all the emphasis on the Renaissance and Italy was misplaced, and that I should study her period, which was the year 800 in Europe. Curious. So I'm going to show you Gaia's pictures, show something about the development drawing. Eriko showed metaphors and represent thoughts. Really opened her mind to the possibilities. And Esref's, well, he will show perspective. I'll concentrate on that. Esref, by the way, was born totally blind, no eyes. The other guys lost the vision in the first year or so of life. Here is Chauvet Cave, 30,000 years ago, and you will notice that there is a line used for, here, a crack, that's the mud, a tail here, which is sort of the opposite of a crack. There's now background on both sides, and a mud has foreground on both sides. And here we have a back of a horse, and so we have foreground and background. These are all surfaces. Surfaces are things that structure the light to our eye so that we can see, but surfaces are also what we touch. So blind people should be able to draw what we see, because there are surfaces, and lines stand for surface edges in the drawings. Here is Lascaux, aurochs, in line, much of them. And you will notice here there are two lines used when the horn is thick, and it becomes one line when the horn is big. So surface edge, but if you bring them close together, one line is used. That's the way sighted artists draw, and that's the way I'll show you blind people draw. Now, lines cannot show purely visual borders, let me convince you. They are for the very things we can touch, surface edges. Because here is a person, and lots of shadow borders are on this person's face. As soon as we draw it in outline, it becomes incomprehensible. You just can't see the mouth and nose convincingly in line, whereas you can, in line here, you can if you add shadows. Purely visual in shadows and colors, you can't show with line drawings. Colors don't appear, the shadows don't appear. If you draw surface edges, the surface edges appear in vision, and they do a touch to it. So here's Gaia, blind girl, first test at age 11, then again at age 12. I asked her to draw all kinds of things. Here is a drawing of a cube. Curious, isn't it? Well, this is a fold-out drawing of a cube, so lots of sides of the cubes are shown, all attached. It's folded out. And then she thought of a better way to draw a cube, which would be to show one surface and another surface sort of around it, and then connect it with all the lines that stand for the corners of the tube, receding in depth. Clever, but interestingly, the small square stands for the front surface of the tube, and the big square stands for the rear surface of the tube. So this is actually a cubic inverse perspective. The things are drawn bigger as they get further away, rather than smaller as in linear perspective. This inverse perspective was invented and used widely in the Italian Renaissance. Who don't ever look at almost any of the churches that still have early Renaissance pictures, and you'll see this. And here's this blind girl just invents it right in front of you. And as far as I know, that might be the first time she drew a cube folded up, because her brother and her teacher were terribly shocked when they saw that drawing. They were quite puzzled that she'd drawn them. So they didn't teach her. And then she went on. I asked her to draw a table, and I said, could you draw a table from up above? And she drew a table as a square. That's a table from up above. Good is the vantage point. Then she drew a table where the front edge of the table is small, and the rear edge of the table is drawn on a long line. That's because it's an inverse perspective. So she invents it for the cube, applies it to a table. And by the way, this is the table from underneath. So now the four ends of the legs are shown as little squares, and then the table top is shown as a big square. And that's good parallel perspective. So if you show drawings to blind children to illustrate something, say from the Mayans, you might not bear in mind what's the system they're likely to use. And if you know something about drawing development in the sight and the mind, that can help you. And by the way, here are people drawn by a guy standing, walking, and lying down. So she used inverse and parallel perspective. I think those are common in sighted 8 to 10-year-olds. She's first tested at 11, a little bit behind what might be true for sighted children, but not much. Not metaphor. I said, Conrad's jailers have hearts of stone. You might know who I'm talking about, and you might also understand that we've now said the jailers are unyielding to pressure. You don't literally have hearts of stone. Metaphors combine two things and suggest something that's literally false, but there is a common feature that is wise and appropriate and significant. So let's see Eriko using metaphors. She is totally blind. Early in life, she was told not to draw by her teachers, and then later, in her 30s, a teacher meets her and says, try drawing. I have a few blind kids. They like drawing. Blind kids in my class like to draw. They go to hospital. They come back, and what do? They draw. Their experience is in the hospital. For some reason, they want to spend all day drawing those experiences. Just like psychic kids do after a tough experience. So here is Eriko. She goes to Mexico. She has a little drawing board. This is only a few months after she started drawing in her 30s. Goes there, comes back to Mexico with a suite of drawings. My impressions of Mexico. Like famous artists would have done, in the grand tour of Europe. So she wants to draw tequila. So she draws a tall, thin glass, straws, the levels of liquid. But it's not just any old liquid. This is tequila. So she draws a lot of wavy lines coming out from the glass, and she says, that is the effect. Okay, then she goes swimming off Isla de las Mujeres, and she draws it. The water is wonderful, full of joy. There's a man, later becomes her husband, wonderful man, Michael, and she draws herself. You can see her hair, the back of her swimming costume, her legs, her arms, long wavy lines to the water that she's swimming in, and there's a whole lot of spider webs coming from her hands and toes. And you wonder. And then she says, that's the feeling of the water streaming through my fingers. And then she said, you know what? Those lines might be metaphoric. for the sighted, but they're perfectly literal for the blind. Because you can feel the edges of those streams of water, but you can't see them in the water. Very clever. And then she goes to Australia and she draws a desert which has tall pinnacles. So the big pinnacles close are drawn big. Pinnacles further away are drawn small. Dots for sand, little scraggly things for bushes, tiny little twig-like figures for trees, and an occasional little line cutting between objects is an occasional wind, occasional little breeze. It's a wonderful drawing. It's good perspective, you know. Not clever. Very nice drawing. Then she's sitting in Germany with Michael. She needs a job. She's Japanese. She was educated for her librarianship in Canada. Now she's living in Germany because of this wonderful man that she wants. She needs to get a job. She wants to make friends. She's living in a small town. It's hard to crack into German society, and it's hard to get a job in Germany. And it's hard to get a job as a librarian. Libraries in Germany are like prisons for books. They are not widely accessible to all kinds. You know, books are all kinds of things, and you have to be told that shh. It's remarkable the experience you get in German library. And she's blind. There is at least one very famous Nobel Prize winning blind librarian. But on average, it's hard to get a job as a librarian if you're blind. So she's sitting on the balcony. She has her cup of coffee. She draws her cup of coffee. She's thinking about her coffee. All around the cup, she draws a lot of wavy, circling lines. Those are her thoughts about her problem, going round and round, and never coming to a solution. And there's also a few zigzag lines. Because every now and then, she sighed. And that day, she never solved her problem. Fascinating. Wonderful stuff. There's Eriko and there's Mike. Perspective. Siena is a city with wonderful architecture. Notice the way everything's converging when you look up. Take a photograph up. Here it is again. Converging. Superb architecture. But in the early Renaissance, if you ask these guys to draw a table, you notice the top has a smaller edge for the near side and a longer edge for the far side. That's inverse perspective. They get it all wrong. If you ask Esref to draw a table, he draws it with good perspective, with linear perspective. That is, long line from the near edge of the table, short line from the far edge of the table. And as for a table with full chairs, he drew them all chairs. They're all suitably complete or hidden behind the edge of the table. This is a very good drawing. Many sighted people could not draw that. Don't you believe? Then I asked for two cars, one further down the road than the other. The second car was much smaller, the sides of the roads converge. They converge in one direction. That's called one-point perspective. I asked for cups on the table, 6 cups, in 2 rows of 3. The far cups are smaller, closer together. They are more elliptical tops. It's excellent perspective. I asked for cubes. I asked him for a cube directly in front. He drew a square. He drew a cube balanced on a point. It's an excellent drawing. Many sighted people couldn't do that. I asked for a cube moved to the side. So he now draws 2 surfaces, and he makes one have converging lines, because that's the preceding side. And then a cube moves to the side and down, so it's not below you. And then he draws 3 faces that would confront you. I asked for a house with a corner close to you and 2 sides receding from you. He drew that. I gave him a little model house. And then he said, oh, I got a better way to draw it. Because his first time, he drew all the sides with parallel lines. And his second time, he made the sides converge. The lines converge, show the receding sides. That's called 2-point perspective because we're converging in 2 directions. Now, space only has 3 directions. So if you can draw a 3-point convergence, you can draw anything in the universe. He's that close. Here I was teaching from Toronto. I asked her for a house from in front. It had a rectangular roof, but she drew the roof with converging sides, 1-point perspective. Then I said, draw it from up above. And then she drew the 2 rectangles with sides converging up for one side of the roof and down for the other side of the roof, because you're directly above the roof. That's 2-point perspective. Now, 3-point perspective is hard to do for sighted people. And this is actually a correct 3-point perspective, but it looks weird to sighted people. Because I'll ask for a cube directly in front. Everybody gets that. Oh yeah, that's a nice drawing. Cube moved to the side. Why is it tilted, people say? Then a cube moves further to the side. Why is it tilted, and why is one face gotten really tiny in the drawing? Well, the answer is, this is 3 cubes below you. Now imagine you were Spider-Man swinging above the Empire State Building. And you had your camera with you, and you tilted, you took a picture, because you want to publish something in the days of Google, you made money. So, what happens? Well, the Empire State Building is converging on to the sidewalk, isn't it? But that means any building on the side is also leaning in your picture and converging down to the same point. That's as if they're railroad tracks. They all have to converge down. Why do you lose a lot of the side? Well, anything that moves to the side, any cube like this that shows you 2 faces, well, it's one face that's becoming more and more the only one you can see. The other one is now getting more and more hidden. So that's correct. And the Italian Renaissance artists realized it. And then they said, you know, some of those drawings look weird. And Leonardo da Vinci's contribution to the study of perspective is this. He said, don't show those weird-looking ones. Only show the ones that look directly in front of you, and then the picture will buy your picture. And you will eat. So I asked Esref to draw 3 cubes, and look, he did it. And he did it in good perspective. 3-point perspective. These cubes are converging up the page, they're converging down at an angle, down the page, and they're also getting smaller as we go to the left, so that's convergence in the 3rd direction. You can do it all. He's brilliant. There isn't anything more. So, Discovery Channel and I took them to the Baptist group where perspective was invented. There's 2 sides of this Baptist leaf go off at an angle of 45 degrees. So they both have to converge, left and right. And I asked them to draw it. I let them feel a corner, feel a bit of the walls and stuff. Then I sat down and gave him a model of the building. I think the most important thing I said to him was, then you show that the roof is high above you. And when I asked him to do that, we made some drawings, and this was the final product of that. And he said, brilliant. Sighted people generally can't do it. He shows the left and right sides converging. Top comes down, lines come down. So the bottom edge of the building, the lines come up. It's good convergence, left and right. And the way of doing that, he actually made a sketch working on principles, I think, and then he also had to converge up. 3 ways in which it was converging, left, right, and up. Wonderful. I asked a guy in Australia, then a blind musician, to draw a glass in front of him. A glass tilted back and in front of him, and a glass with the base of the glass facing him. And what did he do? You get a nice V for the sides of the glass and it's right in front. You get a shorter V, it's foreshortening when the glass is tilted back, and now the base is drawn as a bit of an ellipse. And then for the glass tilted fully back, with only the base forward, he draws a circle and does a little scribble to show there is a surface. So we're receding, and it's quite narrow. It's foreshortened enormously. So blind people have a good sense of the directions of objects, and if you ask them to make drawings that show those things, often they do. So, conclusion. Let's provide art access to the visually handicapped. Lots of places are doing this now, not just the Boga Gallery and the Melbourne Gallery in Berlin, but the Tate in London and the MoMA in New York and the Met in New York. And a lot of these things are actually being shown lots of places. Oh, by the way, the Louvre is doing them too. Programs are now available there on art, the history of art. There's a group called Art Education for the Blind, New York. They produced a 20-volume set with raised drawings in it. Art History for the Blind. Take art to the present. It's spectacular. A lot of people have been able to find this evidence. This is not a practice or a fashion. This is evidence that this stuff works. And then you build a practice, a program on top of that to suit whatever needs you have. Why do this? Well, the evidence shows raised line pictures can be used by the blind. When they are drawing objects, they show the shapes of objects, the very thing you see. And they have different levels of sophistication in their drawings, especially if they've only recently begun. There's kind of child level and adult level. And I think Eriko, Esref's perspective and narrative drawings are kind of firsts in art history. We had no idea 20 years ago that any of this is possible. And it's just spectacular that it is possible. Thank you very much. Great question. I'll tell you just two stories. One of them is, imagine a blind woman. I was with a test in Ottawa, and she said, I'm no good with space. I can't do this kind of thing. I've no experience with pictures. I can't draw. And basically, I said to her, take up that pen and draw. And she started. And her first drawing was a scribble. She was drawing on this baseline drawing. Simple kit. And her first drawing was a scribble. And then she herself said, that's That's no good. I should draw this box that I was offering to her this way. And then the next drawing, within minutes, had some scribbles, but also had a clear face of the box. Actually, that's like a change from, say, a 2 or 3-year-old to a 3 or 4-year-old sighted kid, which takes a year. And she went through that in less than 5 minutes. And then she said, oh, no, that's not good. Her next drawing had 2 of the faces attached side by side, like a fold-up drawing, which is typical of a 7-year-old sighted child. So within 15 minutes, she had gone through 3 or 4 years of drawing those on her own. I have never taught anybody. I just want to know what they can do, what they think about what they're doing, and how they think they might improve. And then what I see is they're gradually themselves getting better, because the drawing development sequence that unfolds in the sighted child also unfolds in the blind. And they push themselves to that sequence themselves. Okay, the second story is Esref herself. So she was encouraged to draw, so she said, okay, I'm going to draw an Advent wreath. I don't know what that is. It's in Germany or in Northern Europe, where there is a wreath of greenery, and then typically 4 candles set in a square fashion around this circular wreath that would sit on your table. And so she wanted to make them go sideways. She was drawing a fold-out drawing of the wreath and its 4 candles as her first drawing as an adult. So, my suggestion to you is, don't think that it is necessary to start at some peculiar place which they must have, like 3-dimensional real object. Then move to representation of their sculpture. Then strip away another dimension and go to bas-reliefs. Then strip away another dimension and go to 2 dimensions. No, just drop them in the deep end and say, please draw. And you'll find they will use lines for surface edges without asking you, what can a line stand for? That's some knowledge to it. And they will start drawing shapes that are relevant. And they'll start using spatial systems that are like sighted children, and then they will themselves mature as they themselves evaluate their own drawing. By the way, the box I was asking you to draw was hexagonal. It was a Jean Natte cosmetics box that could fold up. I could put it in my pocket. Complicated enough that it's a challenge for anybody. And so it was a nice sort of task. Draw a cube, draw a table, draw a glass, draw a hand, draw a Jean Natte box. These are simple things you can offer people as targets. And they will draw them, and they will criticize their own drawings. And they'll satisfied with some parts of it, and they will drive themselves into more sophisticated drawings. Okay, is that enough?
That is great. I know that there's other questions, and
I'm happy to stay.
Yes.
Love talking about this. Love to know your experiences.
Clearly, again, another very passionate person with lots of